Further, we're now joined by the CEO of Brand SA, that's Miller Matola. Thank you for joining us, Miller. If we look at this research, so you go and gauge what international investors are thinking, what they perceive about us, does it mean a rethink, and what should we be doing differently?
Well, one of the things that the research tells us is that obviously we need to tailor-make our communication strategies accordingly for each of the markets. But I think a positive that comes out of this is that we are still very high in the consideration set as a country. So when investors are polled in their perceptions as to how they see South Africa, in fact they rank us fourth within the BRICS as a country that is investable.
Is that fourth of emerging markets?
It's fourth of within the BRICS, but about sixth when you look at the emerging markets that were polled, which would include the markets such as Turkey, for an example, Nigeria. So,
okay, so we're the top among emerging markets.
We are top. We are top, yeah.
Well, among the top. 87% of respondents had heard of South Africa recently from some source, which is very high. So we're in their mind, but what are they hearing, I guess, is the question.
Well, 87% is overall, but if you look at it, about 61% have had some, a lot information on South Africa as an investment destination, so they are consciously aware of what South Africa has to offer. And chief of what is in their minds is the fact that South Africa is a growing economy, we have good infrastructure, and somehow they see our cost of doing business as low.
Which is interesting, because we see small businesses, for instance, see the cost of doing business as very high. We have concerns about infrastructure and our slowing economy. So how come there is that mismatch?
Well, I think it's a function of, if you look at infrastructure, for example, there's been a huge infrastructure build program that's been on the cards in South Africa, and that is underway as we speak. So a lot of that is filtered through into, investor perceptions and their understanding of what is happening in South Africa. And therefore, it can be explained in that respect. For example, if you look at the issue of cost of doing business, and you look at countries on the continent, they would rank that slightly differently and see cost of doing business as slightly high. Again, you could be a function, for instance, of the exchange rate and what it is at the moment. So I think what it tells us is that we need to be also careful about, just generalizing the different perceptions that pertain to different markets globally.
You looked at what Russian investors say as opposed to Indian investors. So will you start tailor-making, or are you already doing that, tailor-making the marketing strategies per the country?
I think it's a communication issue here, Francis, because if you think about it, we have to compare or overlay the perception study with the reality. And when you look at the reality, our trade and investment, South Africa, which is responsible for obviously investment promotion, indicates that the pipeline in terms of investment coming into the country is still growing. And I think that almost tells us that from our perspective, we need to start communicating more of those things that they might not be associating. For instance, you raise the issue of mining. But there are other sectors. South Africa is becoming a diversified economy, and there are other sectors within the South African economy that are equally very vibrant and very strong. And I think we need to start pushing those messages out there.
Are you concerned? Because top of people's minds, investors' minds, when they think of South Africa is mining. Your research found that. Now we have this huge strike. You also had the Competitiveness Forum last year talking about labor relations. So is this a big blow to our reputation, because people think of us in terms of mining?
No, not at all. I don't think it's a big blow. I mean, mining is kind of the bedrock of the South African economy, and we have huge competencies and capabilities in that area that are still count for a lot. But it could also be a fact that what is coming through is all the communication and the messages they're getting about what's happening in the mining sector. So I don't think it's really indicative of the fact that we are taking a knock there in terms of that sector. What is clear, however, is that we need to ensure that we move towards stabilizing the issues in the mining sector, because it is considered very highly amongst investors, and therefore there will be great appetite, for instance, to getting involved in that sector.
Final question, and very quickly, because investors see us in terms of mining, agriculture, is Trevor Manuel's dream in the NDP of building South Africa as an innovative country, is that a pipe dream?
No, in fact, it isn't. What this is telling us is that we really need to move closer towards actually implementing the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan talks about, for instance, such issues such as export competitiveness. It talks about South Africa's, creating capabilities in other sectors, beneficiating and diversifying. And this is precisely what we are starting to get out of this research. The perception is that, yes, while sectors such as mining and agriculture are strong, there is a move towards the other sectors coming, or South Africa becoming more and more associated with those sectors. Could be telecoms, for instance, even retail, although it's dipped slightly this year. But you are seeing a diversification of the economy, and I think that's largely what the National Development also points towards.
All right, very interesting. Thank you for your time this evening. And that was Miller Matola, CEO of Brand SA.